At the border with Belarus, the head of the Polish Ministry of Internal Affairs and Administration and the deputy head of the Ministry of Defence from the Civic Platform Party met journalists to convince them how good Polish security is and that it will get even better. The budget we are allocating to national defence in 2026 is a record 200 billion zloty. This is almost a quarter of the entire budget of the Republic of Poland. There is no other country in NATO that spends such funds on its security in relation to GDP. The problem with the government is that the devil is in the detail, and defence spending, contrary to what the current authorities claim, is not as high as the ruling party would have us believe. The ruling party is deceiving the public by talking about 5% of defence spending, or that they have allocated 200 billion zloty to defence. They are not spending the amounts they have budgeted for. In 2024, they did not spend over 20 billion zloty. The financial problems of the Ministry of National Defence are a fact. They say that we will spend 200 billion zloty, but there will be less money in the state budget because the real increase in defence spending is 0.4%. Inflation itself is forecast at 3% in 2026. So in relation to this inflation target, we will be spending less on defence. All the more so as more and more facts related to the level of funding for Polish defence are coming to light, thanks to next year's budget bill, which is already in the same. I don't think we are surprised. We know that for the Civic Coalition and the left, defence spending has never been a priority. It is clear that they also feel safe in the context of the war going on in Ukraine and Russia. If they did not feel safe, they would obviously look for savings elsewhere, not in defence. And so, for example, ammunition for the Korean Chonmu missile launchers, that is, the Polish HOMAR-K project. As revealed by the former head of the Polish Ministry of National Defence, the current authorities are blocking the purchase of ammunition for these launchers. The Ministry of Finance has suspended funding for missiles for the Chonmu missile system and modernisation expenditure, which concern the most important part of the Ministry of National Defence activities, that is, strengthening the Polish army in the draft budget for next year, are over 9 billion zloty less than in the budget that is being implemented in 2025. And the government, which promises mountains of gold for defence, is unable to find 10 billion zloty for missiles for launches that we already have. And what does the Civic Platform say about this? The party's message of the day comes to the rescue. The expenditures planned in next year's budget are significantly higher for defence. Additional funds will also go to the Polish budget. We are buying modern systems and investing in the Polish army, and today that is the overriding goal. For now, the head of the Ministry of National Defence can also count on the loyalty of his subordinates in the Polish People's Party. A little less lying, a little less hate. Let's ask the Minister of Defence for more details, because it seems to me that Minister Kosiniak-Kamysz, when it comes to ammunition, has achieved the most of all governments so far. We have a serious problem with the entire process of modernising the armed forces. This process simply has no current plan. Buying planes without missiles, tanks without ammunition, howitzers without shells to fire, it's just ridiculous. We asked the Polish deputy head of the Ministry of Defence about the issue of missiles for HOMAR-K launches. Will there be no purchase of missiles for the Chonmu launchers? There will be all the necessary resources that will give us a capability for national air defence. Is this a necessary measure, Minister? Of course. The Deputy Minister declined to comment on the cuts in next year's budget for technical modernisation and military infrastructure investment, key areas related to strengthening Poland's defence capabilities. It is high time that citizens realise that the government's poor economic policy, which is completely ineffective, has a significant impact on the country's security system, because without sufficient funds we are simply unable to build a strong army that will deter our enemies. Interestingly, the current authorities link military spending to Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk's unfulfilled promises, starting with the current head of the Chancellery of the Prime Minister, who used his defence spending to explain the lack of an increase in the tax-free allowance. If we postpone the rearmament of the Polish army and, for example, lowered taxes now, because the increase in military spending is many times higher than the cost of lowering taxes, we would, of course, fulfill one of the 100 specific promises, but we would not fulfill the most important promise for Poles, namely the sense of security as quickly as necessary. This year's defence spending is lower than expected, and next year it is to be reduced further. Another issue is the number of jobs in the army, which in the draft budget of the Ministry of Defence for next year is falling by over 14,000. Today there is not enough money to carry out the tasks resulting from commitments and agreements that have already been made. That is why there is no room for soldiers or those who want to continue their service in the Polish army by participating in specialist training, or for those who want to become professional soldiers. We have seen a threefold decline in the rate of recruitment to the service. We have seen a slowdown in key arms contracts, some of which have been suspended altogether. And worst of all, there is a complete financial crisis in the Polish Ministry of National Defence. What is the solution to Poland's defence problems after 2 years of the December 13th coalition government? To keep repeating that everything is fine.